Hello and welcome to GAMEOLOGY episode 39, The Good, the Bad, the Super Mario Brothers. I am one of your permanent hosts, Matthew Fava, and I'm joined as always by...
Attila, Gabriel Branitzky.
What a fun topic to talk about. I think that the Mario games we end up taking for granted, and a lot of the great... I think people take Nintendo for granted, and they just focus on what they're doing wrong and the strange decisions that they make. But when you go back and you look at this game... First off, it is still fun to this day. I still play this every once in a while. And at the time, it was truly revolutionary, but I was surprised at how well it holds up over the years. This is a game that, I have friends that come over every once in a while, and maybe they're not into a lot of the modern games. Too many buttons confuse them. They don't like dual stick controls. But they have grown up with these games, and they can understand it. So this is a game I'll throw in because... you can beat it in a few hours, and because of the warps that are involved and all that stuff, you can play through it.
Yeah, I haven't beaten it.
Oh, okay. Now see there, isn't that amazing? The game that keeps on giving. One day you will, my friend. I only recently beat Super Mario Brothers 2, and that, I think I must have used save states or the saving on the Super Nintendo version that remasters the first three, which is a fantastic game too. So, did you end up going back and sort of revisiting this before we did this podcast, or were we talking about old memories?
No, I've got a good number of things that I wanted to talk about, like in terms of just the overall design of the game. Like the reason it holds up so well is because it's just a solidly designed game. Like the level design, everything about it is just super tight, and like there have been refinements to the Mario formula over the years, but like this is the game that really set the bar for what a platformer should be in so many ways. Yeah,
there's been, I'd say, like refinements and more like expansion, because this is a very tightly constructed game. It has a sort of a pattern that it likes to follow, that it sets up. It's got the ground levels, the underground, the water, and a castle level, and all the castle levels are pretty much identical. This is a spoiler for you, Attila, but in the last castle, you're going to encounter what seems like a maze. And it's really genius how the problem they present to you and the solution is handled by not creating any more assets at all, but still making you think and making it very difficult. And it's just a genius design and the use of what they had to work with. So let's talk about the level design. What were your thoughts on that?
So really, the level design is just like, it's taking advantage of everything that they create as a game element. So what I mean by that, these are levels that are constructed out of blocks that you can break, enemies, power-ups, coins. Like there's really not many different elements that go into the creation of any single level. It's just their arrangement that is like so well constructed. The placement of where you get the power-ups, the hidden blocks, like in an early game, exploring, encouraging exploration. Yeah. Like just to try and find these blocks. Like how else are you going to actually succeed at this if not for all the extra lives that you end up accruing over time and then getting better and better at the game. So there's just so much about it that's... like I said, right from the early days, they are setting the tone for how every other platform should be. And yeah, there were other platformers out at the time. So what I wanted to talk a bit about was like what really set apart Mario Brothers from the crowd, I guess. So like other people were making platformers in the day, and many other people rushed to make platformers after the fact once they saw the success of Mario Brothers. So what do you think are some of the things that really set Mario Brothers apart in terms of design?
As you were talking about that, I thought, I'd really love to see what other games were coming out at that time to directly compare. Do you happen to have a knowledge of any offhand that had come out at that time?
No, I just know that a lot of people, in the same way that anytime a successful game comes out nowadays, a bunch of imitators try to hop on the bandwagon and cash in on the success of a popular franchise.
Right. I mean, some games at that time were Ghosts and Goblins, Ice Climber in terms of platforms, Kung Fu.
Yeah, a lot of those are Nintendo's own properties. So I just mean that like other consoles, other systems, they all tried to create their own mascot-based platformers. Well, right? Between the Mario and the Sonic, everyone wanted to have a mascot-based platformer.
I would say that what Mario really nailed, that sort of set the standard, was that the feel of controlling Mario was probably better than than any other game at that time. And still remains, it still feels really good. There were a couple very important things that they did. They added mid-air control, which made it a little more forgiving, and kind of, I feel like you connect with Mario a little bit more. And since there's moving platforms and it's a challenging game, it's forgiving and rewarding to the player, and it lets you have more complex and difficult challenges. Also adding the bit of skid that Mario does as you run and sort of stop. He doesn't stop right on a dime if he has a certain amount of speed. When he jumps, he can't stop right on a dime.
He's got a bit of inertia.
Exactly. Now, the inertia gives Mario a sensation of weight and of... he feels a lot more real and a lot more solid. When Mario has the mushroom, of course, he's a very large sprite. He's very beautiful to look at. These worlds were simplistic, but very, very gorgeous. Like giant, like big blue skies, fluffy white clouds. Even though the enemy sprites were very, very small, they would have these gigantic eyes. And that lends a lot to what would be normally a very simplistic character model. And I think it lets you see into their soul through the eyes. And it's just kind of creating this very inviting, welcoming world. When I think of other older Nintendo games and other games that era, I think of them as these kind of cold, they weren't very expressive, and they were these dangerous environments. When I think of Super Mario Brothers, I think of a really happy place I want to go in and explore and have a great time jumping around.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you touched up on a lot of stuff that I didn't even have written down. But
Whoa!
Yeah, no kidding. There's just that much good to say about Mario. So specifically, I think the one most significant thing that really set Mario apart from other platformers at the time, first of all, the idea that you don't have an attack. This is a game where you can run and you can jump.
Yeah.
So you can build up your speed, and then you can jump higher, you can jump farther, and that jumping has the dual purpose of also being your attack.
Right.
Like, you land on enemies and you crush them in the case of Goombas, and in the case of Koopas, you don't crush them. You land on them, they retreat into their shells, and then they become your weapon. So it's just this, what makes it so ingenious is just the simplicity of the mechanics and the fact that everything has these two purposes. Specifically, the run button in Mario is also the button to shoot fireballs. But that you could let go and press the button without losing your speed. Your jump, as I said, is both your means of traversal and your means of attacking things.
Right.
So even with just the simple control scheme of left, right, jump, and run, you have all these nuanced controls. You can duck to go under things. There's all these small things that you start to realize about the controls if you really play with it. On the surface it seems very simple, but then the more you start to combine these things, the more possibilities you realize are there. So that makes the game really approachable, because anyone can understand go left, go right, and jump.
And but for the most part, go right, whereas this didn't even involve backtracking at the time.
Exactly.
It was just very
go
simple.
Left was just an idea of avoid that enemy that's about to hit you, and then keep going forward.
I'm almost surprised that because Japanese writing is written right to left, that they didn't start you off from the right and go to the left.
I think there was just a sort of a feel that if this was ever going to reach an American audience, that there are so many times where if you see in an anime, they have English text already written in. Even in the Japanese dub, there's English text, because they just know the Japanese can read English, but the Americans can't read Japanese.
Right.
We'll just accommodate those people who only speak one language. Poor fools. So yeah, Koopas, super great enemy design. The idea that it's something as simple and readable as a turtle that retreats into its shell when you land on it,
right?
But then you send it spinning, and then motion is a thing you understand. You understand that you bump into something, it starts moving, and then something moving coming towards you, you naturally want to avoid it. It's still an enemy, and you can see that you can use this to kill other things, but it's dangerous to the player, and it can come back and hurt you.
That's the great thing, is that the rules are consistent. The turtle will hurt you, so it will hurt the enemies as well.
Yeah. So just everything about the design of the Koopa is just ingenious. That, I think, might be, it's certainly not the last of my notes on this game, but it's at the top of just this is something that set Mario apart. It's not just an enemy that you jump on. It's not just an enemy that has multiple hits. It's an enemy that can be used as something that you have to avoid and as something that you can use to kill other things or break blocks in the environment. Like there's just so much utility around the Koopa that it's just excellent design.
And that was actually going to be the main enemy of the game. And Miyamoto famously only introduced the Goombas because he thought if a new player had never played a video game, was going to play this, and saw the turtle coming towards them and jumped on it, and then it maybe came back to life and bit them, you sort of imagine is happening, they thought that might be frustrating. So they only introduced the Goomba as a training enemy, just so that it was one, jump on it, kill, and then we'll introduce the more complex Koopa later on.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is the feeling that I had when I was designing my games, is that I want to jump in and create these complex, interesting enemies right away. I forget how important it is sometimes to make it so that you have simple enemies that can die in one shot. Like that's just, it's something that you feel like, why are these even here? You know, what's the point? They're just basic. They don't do anything interesting. And yet it's really important just like to let the player, you know, dip their toes in the water and get a feel of like, okay, stuff dies if I shoot it. Like if the very first enemy you have in your game has like a regenerating health mechanic or something like that, that's interesting, but it doesn't give the player good feedback of, I need to shoot this thing to make it dead. They would have a complete disconnect with that. So adding Goombas to the game was perfect for that reason. Like they're useful in terms of like getting jumps off of them. They're still interestingly designed enemies, but they fulfill this necessary and basic role of like the cannon fodder.
And even where he places the Goomba in the first level is underneath the blocks. So when you jump on it to kill it, you're going to hit those and you're just going to struggle. Well, you're going to accidentally find out about how these work. He has a question mark to start off, and then he has the blocks to show you the differences between them, that you can stand on them. He puts a question mark above that, and then he places a pipe right at the end of it with no pits or anything.
Like, again, just exploration, right?
Yeah.
What's in every question mark block? It's consistent. Some of them have coins, some of them have power-ups. You don't know. There's a mystery. There's a sense of intrigue.
And it's always something good as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's always something beneficial to the player, which is something they changed in the second Mario Brothers when they had the poison mushrooms.
Right.
And then the pipes. The pipes as well also encourage the sense of exploration, because you can't go in all of them. You can't go in most of them. A lot of them are just decoration. But it encourages the player to like try them all out, and you end up building this mental map of like, oh, I can go in this one and there's a whole bunch of coins and a 1-up hidden in there. I can't go in that one, so I just avoid it. This one has a piranha plant popping out of it. I need to be careful.
Right.
There's just, again, a lot of utility out of each one of these assets, like from just being a simple block to being something that an enemy pops out of, to something that's actually beneficial. Just pipes, question mark blocks, even the fact that regular blocks, when you break them, sometimes have items in them. Like, again, just building these secrets into the game. Super great to have that sense of exploration and like getting a familiarity with the game.
Yeah, and it's I'm not sure if in that first level they have any pits, but
yeah, they do.
Okay, like sort of introduced later on to that level, so you're not able to get past that first level unless you can beat one sort of simple bottomless pit.
Right, yeah, you have to clear this. I think the way they actually construct it specifically is they have, you'll recognize the shape of them. They're these sort of two sort of sloped arrangements of blocks, like a 3, then 2, then 1 slope stack on one side, and then a 3, then a 2, then a 1 slope stack on the other side, with a solid platform underneath, so that if you fall between them, it's fine, but ultimately to clear that challenge, you have to jump from one to the other.
Right.
And then later, they have that same arrangement of the 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3 blocks, but now there's a bottomless pit. So you understand, it's like, okay, just like before, I need to jump from here to here. Like, we could spend an entire episode just analyzing every single piece of level 1-1 in Mario.
Absolutely.
Like Miyamoto famously did admit that idea of like, here's the thing, this Goomba, it's coming towards you. If you don't jump over it, you die. So here's the next Goomba, you try to jump over him, you accidentally hit the question mark block above you, and you realize that's a thing that does something in this game. It gives you a power-up. The mushroom pops out. The mushroom starts moving. You initially think, oh, moving things, I should avoid those because they look kind of similar to the Goombas.
Right.
But then there's such a low ceiling that the mushroom falls down, hits a pipe, turns around, starts coming towards the player, even if you tried to jump over it, you're most likely just going to hit your head again and get the power up, and you realize, oh, I'm bigger now. This is helpful.
Right.
So yeah, that's a thing that Miyamoto has confirmed, is like, this was intentional. We made it this way on purpose because he's a design god. And
isn't there so much more fun in discovering that with a sense of mystery, as opposed to endless tutorial boxes and annoying characters telling you and holding your hand? It's like Breath of the Wild all over again, where it's fun to find out even very simple things. Just like I think people that play games, a lot of the appeal is that mystery and that discovery.
Exactly. So that's, just one of the absolute best things about the design of just the very beginning of 1-1. Yeah. And then to transition into, like, what does this mushroom power-up actually mean to you? Well, you can take 2 hits before you die now. So when you get hit, you become smaller. You're smaller, your hitbox is smaller, now it's easier to avoid damage. Mm-hmm. So having health physically represented on the character means you don't need to take your eye away to look at some abstract health bar in the corner of the screen. You know how close you are to dying just based on whether you have a power-up, whether you're big size, or whether you're small size. So just that visually represented on the character without the need for an abstract concept of hit points makes the game really easy to read, and it means that the level of challenge is proportional to how close you are to dying. Mm-hmm. You have a large hitbox both when you have a power-up and when you have the mushroom, so that means that you're more likely to take a hit. But then when you become smaller, then your hitbox is like half as big, and it's easier for the player to like fit underneath gaps and other things that prevent them from dying. Like, they're not in the sight range of bullet bills anymore.
Right.
So
exactly.
Just all these things come together towards like dynamically adjusting the difficulty just by changing the hitbox size, and it's all linked to the health system. Like, it's crazy. It's such good design.
Yeah, it's a masterclass that you can still learn from. I mean, if I think about applying that to a modern game, if a character is shooting bows and arrows, just show the quivers in the show the arrows in the in the quiver in the holster. Or I always like a first-person shooter that has the bullet, like some kind of maybe more of a futuristic game that has like the bullet like counter right there, or a vibration, or just some sort of sensory thing that makes you not have to look around and take your eyes off the action.
Take your eyes away from the cone of like the main center of your vision.
Yeah.
What I did when I was designing Zarnok Fortress is I made it so that every time the player took damage, their health bar becomes visible directly above the character. Mm-hmm. So that way you don't have to look at the top of the screen to realize how much health you do or do not have. It's directly above you.
And then does it fade away?
It fades away, unless you have only 1 health, in which case it stays there blinking.
Right.
I also made it so that the sprite model itself goes through different damage phases. So you have like normal full health, you have like, and then 3 distinct like layers of damage sprite layered over top of that. So you can see your character is becoming more and more damaged over time. All of that to try and represent this thing which Mario does by just physically changing the size of the sprite without like, none of that detail and layering and all that sort of stuff. It's just, what does your sprite look like? You can gauge how much health, how many hits you can take just from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is a game that was built for multiple playthroughs, like many games were at the time, because they weren't as big as a 40-hour action RPG that we would have nowadays with full of side quests. They would make the game very, very challenging. Yeah. Especially, it really, really ramps up as you go later on. And
that's why I still haven't beaten it.
And then also including these shortcuts for players that want to play through it, so that you can grab these warps, these 2 different spots for that. You can get right to the end. I mean, a really skilled player that knows what they're doing could probably beat the game in maybe about a half an hour if you...
Oh yeah, easily.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's so great about speedrunning in these games, when it's really all about the skill involved. And then once you beat the game, there's also a new game plus where you can play through again, and you don't receive any benefit, but now all the enemies have been upgraded to those little, I think they're called beetle bums or something, and they're the black
beetles?
Yeah, the black ones with the hard helmets. So now all the Goombas have been replaced by them, and the game is a lot more challenging to go through. And that's why I'll still return to this game every once in a while, because you can complete it so fast, and because the 2-player mode, it's I don't know if I think I prefer the later Marios Mario 3 especially, where the two players are working cooperatively, where if I complete one level, you do the next one, and now we've completed two levels. This is a competitive style.
It's like a race.
Exactly, which, you know, it is its own kind of fun, and I think builds off of the original Mario Brothers, which is a very, very competitive game. That's the two Marios on the different platforms and hitting the POW blocks and all that. So I think it builds on that, and it's different. I prefer the other one, but there are some times where it is fun to compete with your friend and see, you know, who can get through this game. When somebody dies, you know, that's your chance to make some hay and get past them.
Yeah. So I think that, like you mentioned, the warp zones.
Yeah.
I like that they're in there, and they had to be in a game where you had no save data. And at the same time, I feel like the main reason I have never beaten Mario Brothers is because I grew up in the age of the internet. I learned about these warp zones. I learned about where to find them, and then I end up just skipping huge chunks of the game, and I never get better at it.
Right.
So that's my own fault as a player. But if you were to redesign the original Mario Brothers, I would take warp zones out until you had unlocked them. Like, I'd make it so the player has to get to world 2, 3, and 4 before those pipes become active, just so that the player is encouraged to actively play through the whole game. That or making it so that the skill ceiling for discovering the warp zone is much higher, so you actually have to prove, I'm actually that good at the game, let me warp ahead to these places. Because it would be much better to just have a save system. Like, if Mario Brothers had a save system, I'd definitely have gotten through it by now. Like, just if I were to pick it up on the Wii U, then it would have a save system where at least I could use the save state feature on the Wii U. You know, kind of essentially save scumming my way through the game. But if in my perfect vision of like what Mario Brothers would be, you'd have to change so little, that and take out the swimming levels, because good lord, yes, they wanted to provide variety to the player and create a different set of like gameplay circumstances, but it's just so much harder to avoid enemies in like multiple vectors. Bloopers specifically, oh my gosh, those things, like, they're so difficult to avoid.
Is Blooper
just because
the
they have
squid?
these erratic movement patterns. Yeah, Blooper's the squid.
Yeah, and I think the biggest problem with them is that they sometimes play by different rules. Other times they'll leave you alone if you're on the ground, and other times they just stick right on top of you, and they do have such a fast speed that it's one of the only times in the game where I feel like I get locked into a spot and I might not be able to progress without where you don't have enough room to sort of lead them off in another way. You know, another enemy that is can be problematic and is actually from the sea are the fish, but when the fish are in the air levels, the land levels, and they're just rocketing through the air and they're coming at you so fast, it kind of becomes I think it takes a skill out of it, because you're just really going by luck. It's just all about the angle, and you're just hoping that you don't accidentally hit them at the right angle. So those are probably the two big drawbacks, and they're both from the swimming levels initially, at least.
So there's, like, as I said, shockingly little I would change about the original Mario Brothers, were it up to me to create a modern remaster of it. Like, just a couple tiny tweaks. And I'm not saying you have to get rid of the swimming levels, but just mechanically, it's not something that was as solid as the rest of the game. I think we'll talk about it more in Mario Brothers 3, how they tackle the swimming levels and make them more palatable. But just in that original game, I don't think anyone is going to jump to the defense of the swimming levels. I think that's pretty a safe thing to say. Like, they were not loved by people who otherwise do love the rest of the game.
Yeah, were there some other big points you wanted to tackle moving
Let's
forward
see here? So you talked about Koopas, we talked about the health system, just ingenious. The secrets, the warp zones, that's about it. So, Super Mario Brothers, the good, the very mostly like 99% good, and then the tiny little bit of bad that honestly you can't really fault them for at the time, because they were doing so much else that was right, and they set the bar for what platformers should be, and then they went and smashed that record with Mario Brothers 3, which we'll be talking about in due time.
And I would definitely recommend anyone who hasn't played the game to go back and give it a shot. I'm sure you would as well, Taylor, based on what you had said.
Oh yeah, like I have it on Virtual Console. I mean to beat it. I do my best to try and beat every game that I own, which is why Steam sales don't work on me because I don't buy thousands of games that I have never gonna have the time to complete.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm started getting into that mode too, where it's
summer sales coming soon.
Oh my god.
Watch your wallets.
Watch out, everybody.
It'll be out. It'll be over by the time this podcast airs, but you know.
I actually have a list now of games I own. Make sure not to forget about, because I think I logged into GOG and I thought, oh, what? I own all these games? Because I probably bought them for $2 here, $3 there. I need to go back and play them. All right, well, that has been our look at Super Mario Brothers. We're going to be covering all the Mario games in this series, I would imagine. We've had a great time doing it so far. We've covered Mario Galaxy 1, we've covered Super Mario 3D World, and Mario 64. So we'll have to eventually hit Sunshine. We're going to be doing 3 next time, and then 2, if you're up for it. I think that's still a pretty interesting addition. You can find me on Twitter at GameThinkTalk. You can find my work at a90skid.com. There's an audio version of this podcast on Atila's website, Blue Screen Productions, or you can find it on iTunes. Please leave a review. It means a lot. And Atila?
You can also find on my website the submission box for questions, which we will read and answer on the show if we ever get any. Yes, as Matthew mentioned, reviews on iTunes are super helpful. I see we've gotten a couple there, and it just really feels great to see the positive feedback that we've been getting. So we'll keep making it as long as you still love it, and then we'll probably make a few more after that.
Yeah.
But you can also find on my website some of my game projects, some of which are free to play. And you can also follow me on Twitter at my personal handle, Attila Gabriel, or at Blue Screen Pro. So thanks a lot for listening.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.